Hello and welcome. Uh, this is RoniJean and myself, Rainey Ford, and we are coming here this evening to have a deep conversation around what's involved and ways that we can examine how we can best hold ourselves and community through times of growth and evolution. And so we want to speak from this sort of large perspective first. We want to show you kind of the forest of what we're speaking about, because there are some places that there are deep conversations to be had that we're not speaking to tonight. We are choosing where we're having the conversations. And then we're going to dive in a little bit deeper and speak about some specific details. RoniJean's going to come to you in a little bit and speak to you about ways to explore things through stacked lenses of understanding. Where I want to speak to you for a moment is a few different layers, or another set of lenses, if you will, through which we can look at ourselves and the world around us in ways where we can have potentially deeper conversations. I'm going to share my screen here just for a quick moment. So I want to give you a visual representation of this forest that I'm speaking of. This is the TouchStone matrix, and we are looking at, let me show you the main one first. This is sort of the full perspective, where we are looking at the self, and we're looking at things from the perspective of awareness, sovereignty, communication, and agency for and from the self, right? For the self and from the self. What we need, what we can give, how we can show up. And then the same thing repeats itself through the four categories of relationship, mission, and community with the self. And then the relationship and the community both have some pieces that of their own, right? Relationship looks at peered relating, powered relating, and leadership. And community looks at the community of people and also the egregore of energy and land and reputation, and how we communicate ourselves through things like social media and through technology. And so knowing that we have this kind of like this overarching perspective, we can also then choose to see each of these things through a certain kind of lens. So this one is a community at center lens. We're going to have this conversation tonight. And in a few moments, RoniJean's going to be speaking about some pieces where, while she is speaking about the lenses of how things can be perceived, I invite you to be exploring in your own world the differences between how you relate for and from yourself and how you relate for and from within community. What does your community roles look like in relationship to your self roles? Self at center is examining things from a very different kind of perspective. How we show up for ourselves can be a mirror reflection of how we show up with and for community, and the lenses and the perspectives are different. We're listening to the world around us, the land around us, the people around us, the energy around us here at Community at Center. And at Self at Center, we are listening to our human self. We're listening to our skin suit, and we're listening to our divine soul callings inside of our world. And we're also listening to the world around us as we learn to relate to how we fit into it. And so with that sort of like large lens perspective, I'm going to step out of this share. I'm going to come back to here. So inviting you through holding each of those, right? I invite you to the responsibility of yourself, big S, little s, human self, divine self, and then your role and your place in community, community being where we each sit as an equal member around that table. We have a sovereignty in community that is same, similar, and different than sovereignty for self. RoniJean, would you like to take us a step deeper, my dear?
When I am moving through moments of connection. I'm looking in each of those places. And part of how I work with that is looking at both what I'm experiencing and those lenses that I'm experiencing it through. And that in particular is because I have a practice of expanding those lenses to look at how they got shaped so that I can continue to update the information that is my baseline understanding as I get new data, as I come to new understandings about how the world can work, what is possible, how people function inside of joy and distress, inside of stress and strain in a moment or over a long period of time, because these are all different dances that we're in. In order to do that, I use a few ideas about what a lens is and some tools that I find really useful. And some of that comes down to looking at a lens in a particular way and looking at lens stacks in particular ways. Wrangling the view for presenting. Okay. All right. When I am looking at lenses, I'm thinking of a lens as a structure, which is formed to hold a worldview. And we carry this worldview by maintaining the lens. These lenses and our worldviews are built out of our default assumptions, our perspectives, our behaviors, our way that they show up in the world. Our default assumptions are based in my experience, accumulative experience, home and societal cultures, conscious learning and subconscious recognitions or absorptions, familial group narratives and personal narratives. And these shape our expectations and perspectives. Those perspectives being based on our default assumptions, poignant new experiences, examined and unexamined narratives, our growth, and our intentional learning. And these shape our worldviews and our understandings. Then our behaviors are based in all of these pieces, the default assumptions, the perspectives, the worldview. Life demands. What does life demand of you? Some of that is our choice, and some of that is what is needed in order to meet those choices, and some of it is simply what is based on outside forces. And then the habits that we develop inside of those. All of that shapes our interactions and our relationships. So when I'm examining these things, I'm looking at a lens. It's a bundle of default assumptions, and we can pick them up consciously or unconsciously. Their accumulated influence on us tends to be subconscious, even while it is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's with us in how we see a bird flying through the air. It's with us in how we see humans interacting with one another. It's with us in how we regard the non-human world. It's with us inside of the assumptions, the triggers, the ideas that we have about what people mean when they're talking to us, and the ideas we have about ourselves. Unless, that is, we decide to consciously curate our lenses, which hands us the power of our own sovereignty. Now it's that piece where I'm looking at, expanding it, looking into it, and working with it. These are some different types of lenses that we might have. We think of a worldview as the culmination of everything that we tend to think about how the world works. And I find it to be a series of lenses. We might have family, friendship, integrity, ideas about what worth is, or what success is, or what failure is. And sometimes they're standalone ideas that interact very differently once they're layered in together. From lenses to lens stacks, remembering that our default assumptions serve a purpose. We get to not have to think about the sky being blue or gray unless it's impacting what we're doing for the day. We already understand that those are some of the options for what the sky looks like. That grasses can be brown or green or bluish even at times. We don't have to put ourselves into the deep recognition in every moment about all of the little parts that we were with in a big way at some point when we were learning things. And our default assumptions are based in that accumulated knowledge. We save time because we know what we know. Getting into lens stacks. I view lens stacks as two different variants. We can have this expanded stack, which is a nuanced view of the layers of a given worldview. So that might be where we take that family lens and we look at the baklava layers of it, right? All those little thin, flaky, thin little nuanced bits about what is family to us. And some of that might be really good and some of it might be really hard. And it's all the different pieces of what family is to us. And that would be that expanded stack where we're taking a lens and we're looking at its layers and we may be reshaping them. We may be cleaning them. I know these things get real gross sometimes. And I don't notice until I notice. So going in and cleaning them off can be really good. We can also remove them, replace them, reshape them. The aggregate stack is where we're looking at those different layers, right? We might have what is integrity and friendship and success look like. And we may be looking through a lens stack that is all of our worldviews around those things. And then we might see something new about why we maybe made an assumption when a person said a thing, why our feelings got hurt during some kind of interaction, or why we didn't understand something that was very different for someone else because our cumulative experience didn't have something that theirs did. And we can add layers in of new understanding if we're willing to look at what was, allow it to have been useful, and be augmentable. Got some other pieces, but I really kind of want to step in here together and talk about the usefulness of that.
Oh my goodness. The first thing that comes to mind is at the community level, where there's so much healing possible when we can hold the layers and the levels and the nuances of the many voices that are in play, and that ability at a macroscopic level can become a mere reflection on the microscopic for the personal, of where we can hold that same kind of nuance for ourselves and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can become like its own form of reflection when we play with both of those layers of nuance. So what I'm imagining is like someone's story, the emotionality of where they come from, the way their mind conceived of it, the way their nervous system processed it, might be each different layers inside of a lens stack that someone sharing becomes a stack by which they show themselves.
Mhm.
That's what was coming to mind when you were sharing in that.
Beautiful. I love getting to approach both myself and others differently
Mm.
if I hold at center in my considerations that there's always more to know, right? It can be me looking at, why did I react this way? Why is my nervous system activated in the way that it's activated? And if I can understand that, then I can be in communication with others very differently. And if I can step into, what am I not understanding, and not view it as a failure. See, this is one of the things that I feel is crucial, as we get mostly subconsciously, sometimes more directly trained through experiences in our world and our society into this idea that we're failing if we haven't got it all together, no issues, right? And so then success becomes equated with never having any issue understanding or moving through things. And that's not how things work. That's not how muscle gets built. That's not how learning goes. That's not how we grow
Mm-hmm.
individually. It's not how plants grow.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not how physics works.
Mm-hmm.
So always being with if something is upsetting, that's an indicator that there's something I'm not understanding. And then that means it's an opportunity to learn something, to grow in my understanding of both myself and whatever I'm engaging with.
Mm-hmm. I think about how rich the community conversations and community talking circle, deep circle space is, and how superficial it would be if nobody had depth to share. If nobody had their humanity to share, their human experiences in whatever shape and capacity, anger, sadness, tears, joy, delight, any of those flavors, any and all of them. I feel like there's so much to be learned from each authentic expression.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, I see the results of that in places where it gets celebrated.
Mm.
Those of us who love animals, when a puppy comes up and is in my face, I am excited to learn something new, to get to engage with them, to get to see what this interaction gets to look like,
Mm. Mm.
right? I don't have any way of knowing unless I have a long relationship with an animal and they don't communicate in the same ways we do. So even if I have known them for a long time, they might have something new going on. And there is a beauty in that. There's a delight in that, seeing the things that small children do, seeing the things that different people do when they're with their close people, right?
Mm. Mm.
I love seeing people with their heart connected, absolutely closest beloved people. It's one of my favorite things. They can be strangers at a grocery store, they can be other people on the beach, they can be walking down the road. I love seeing the exchange of regard and love.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It feels like a reward for curiosity. And curiosity reminds me of our earlier conversation, walking in balance around courage.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I sort of, and as I was having that thought, what it was occurring to me was that so much of what I feel this work is a lot of formulas for building courage.
Mm. Mhm.
formulas for understanding where we might be missing something that might give us an ability to have more curiosity that therefore ends up feeding and fueling courage in a
Mm.
not shame inducing way rather than a opening doorways of possibilities kind of way. Mhm.
Having systems for developing different habits than the ones that attempt to have that always put together presence. Because the always put together presence means that there's not any view of the humanity, any view of the
Insides, the
the
guts.
living, the guts, yeah, the guts, the living, the dirty
What are
knees,
they composed of?
right? There's so much that
Hmm.
we miss out on. And because it's impossible to exist without there being bumps, without there being learning moments, then the request, the expectation to be always put together means that we're boxing up, hiding away, masking, covering the parts that are the growth parts, which I spend so much time with you because we both enjoy talking about those pieces, looking at those pieces. That's the rich, loamy earth part of existing as a human animal on this plane.
Hmm. Mhm, mhm.
I've got just one slide about multi-docs because it is, frankly, it's a model of how my brain works that other people have found useful.
Mhm. Me included.
To become a tool, and that is lovely. So I think I'd like to share that now.
Yes, please.
A multi-docs is essentially a tool for exploring a lens stack. It's what happens when you open it up because it's kind of hard to see all the layers, right? We can envision, this gives us a diagram to lay out the layers inside a particular focus. So a multi-docs is a diagramming tool which can be used to examine a lens stack. The lens to be examined becomes the focus lens, right? So if it's family or if it's integrity, whatever we're looking at, whatever relationship we're exploring, and it can be our relationship to a concept like that. It can be our relationship with another person. It can be our relationship with ourselves. And then we get to look at the layers of it, and these are detailed lenses, important aspects of the connection or relationship we are diagramming. It's where we get to explore what assumptions we hold and what is important to us about the topic in focus. And as a granular view, it allows us to review, reshape, remove, and replace outdated lens layers. And again, being in a practice of not shaming that those layers are in there can help this whole tool, this whole process of reshaping a lens, shifting our worldviews, adding in new data become far more easeful. Because if it's there, it was it was put there, it was built, it was shaped for a purpose, for a reason, whether on a conscious level or not. It served some kind of purpose. And what we're doing when we're looking is going, does this still serve? Does this serve who I want to be? Does this serve how I want to move through the world? Does this serve my understanding of what is and do justice to the growth that's happening, to the exploration that's happening? I love to go wander through the woods and explore and see the plants and the animals and the things and how they're interacting with one another and have that experience. I can regard wandering through my worldviews in a very similar way if I'm willing to set down blame and shame and instead pick up discernment and goals.
As you were as you were sharing that imagery around the multi-docs, and thank you so very much for making diagrams of your brain. I think those of us who think in those kinds of structures, for some people, it's really helpful to see the inside of someone else's brain like that, because it's like, oh, it reminds me of those who like to play with Legos. You know how
Mhm.
like if you build a Lego wall, it's great to have something else to build on top of, and then build on top of it, and you don't just build the top of the wall. Like, I mean, you do, but there's layers, and they build on top of each other. And some of us, that's how we build. And so, like, the minute we start to share that, we may give someone else a whole section of a Lego wall that they can plug into where they are, and it helps, feels like it has rich possibility of helping those of us whose brains ache to connect in those ways, be able to see deeper possibilities.
Mhm.
Your multi-docs reminded me so much of the different mindset pictures that I created of the TouchStone matrix, right? So the self at center
Mhm.
and the community at center. Each of those feels like that's a center multi-docs, and then there's the centerpieces that look around it, and each one of them is different, right? Like
Mhm.
self has its own kind of formula of how it stays true. Relationships, like let's talk about being in leadership, or even deeper, being a parent. Like being a parent is kind of like some of the deepest layers of responsibility that exists in that touchstone matrix. It's like you got to be a peered relationship, you have to be responsible in your powered relationships, and then in your leadership, and then you got to take all of that and stitch it back into like seeing them as equals.
Yes.
And so you take a deep responsibility, and they're not giving you that, but there it's not a peer relationship where you're expecting them to take care of you in the same way you're taking care of them. And
Mhm.
that's a whole mission all by itself.
Yes.
So like looking at those depths and nuances and being able to fan out I'm imagining a deck of cards or a hand of cards. Like when you have a child that's born to you, you're handed a deck. This is your hand that you're playing with this child in your relationship, and what that looks like. And then with that, there's things you can do with that.
Mhm.
So that multi-docs to me feels like a way of being able to zoom in, like come out to the forest, go into this section of the trees, zoom
Mhm.
out and see how a change here affects the ripple effect. And so that tool, it's like on a socio-ecological, because I see it in society and ecology, the
Mhm.
ability to zoom in on a subject, analyze the pieces and components of it, see it for how it fits into everything else, zoom in, make a change, see how that affects. And I feel like that's like being both the scientist and the science experiment.
Mhm.
Reminds me very much of that alchemist journey. So thank you for bringing an alchemist tool. That's what I would call that right there. We got lots of them.
I, in my relating with self, tend to look at it as a place where I can chart where all the pieces in those detail lenses
Mm,
are are valuable. They're all on equal footing. And so it's simply a what am I experiencing in this moment? Because so often we're experiencing complex things. I often experience excitement and anxiety at the same
mm,
time,
mm,
right? What are all of the other pieces of relating in order to do this thing that sounds exciting? What are all of the pieces I'm worrying about?
mhm,
Right? What is present for me in this moment while looking at this topic?
mm,
Just in a brief moment, that can help me go, I'm experiencing anxiety, I'm experiencing excitement, I'm experiencing hopefulness.
Mm,
What is tied to what in those things, right? And understanding, oh, my excitement is about the possibility for connection. My excitement is about maybe being able to bring something that I have been able to create, whether it's cookies or a tool like the
mhm,
MultiDox. If I can bring it and it may be able to be enjoyed or helpful to other people, I get very excited.
mm,
Sometimes the anxiety is rooted in the very same process of the bringing. Will my body be up for travel if travel is necessary? Will my body be up for being on camera and sitting and expressing in these ways? Or may I encounter some sort of shutdown? How am I able to work with the possibilities in a way that gives the best opportunity to show up the ways I want to? So it can be a little snapshot in a moment, or it can be looking at and examining my regard for integrity, my regard for family, my understanding of what shapes these things, what's
mhm,
involved in these things, what are the important things to pay attention to inside of relating when focused on one of these subjects. And when I'm working with other people, if I can share with them things that are important to me about a particular aspect of our relating, and if I can get them to share what's important with them, then we have this opportunity to understand our connection differently. There is so much usefulness and value in being able to go, oh, uh, a vacation or a family trip with you is about spending time together, exploring new spaces, and getting to learn more about what you think of the world in a new environment. Those are some of my things that would be top of my list about why traveling somewhere with someone would be important. If someone else maybe shares spending time together, but isn't necessarily looking at learning new things about me, we may approach that time very differently. They may be ready to sit in a different environment and read our books separately, which I'm also good with. And we can shape our expectations and negotiate them. We can come into balance and maybe go, oh, so we've got 3 afternoons to work with on this trip. Maybe we spend them in 3 different ways and make sure everybody's high value things get a little bit of time and attention, and that no one is expected to supply at every moment what someone else wants, because we're not here to dispense what other people are looking for. And we can meet them differently when we have some kind of idea of what they're looking for and what we might be looking for. It brings me back to a point of balance, much like the what am I not understanding? What more is there to understand? What am I maybe understanding in a way that's not reflective of what people are trying to say, right? We expect to have that happen if we're speaking 2 different languages. I'm beginning to learn what people are saying in Spanish. It's great. And there's a whole bunch of the language that I do not know. So I have a limited ability to understand.
mm,
And yet I might be able to communicate an idea more clearly with someone who speaks a different language than the ones I know, because of the level of effort to be able to convey.
mm,
And so ways to come back to balance while growing, while expanding.
mm, mm,
Super high value in my work.
mhm, mhm. When you were sharing that, I was thinking about the value of two pieces. One, normalizing this kind of authentic expression. This is a kind of transparency that I think if we applied that at the level of peered relating, which means that it would apply at every level that has to do with anything other than self, even the leadership side of things. And then we have the capacity to be able to always meet each other as humans,
Mm-hmm.
even if we hold lots of money or lots of power or lots of influence. At the same time, on the other end, while this is still true, I was also seeing this beauty of, let's say, someone who is sitting in power. Let's say it's a manager or a project engineer who's
Mm-hmm.
speaking about what the day's flow is going to look like. And they start out by saying, I want to be able to be transparent and share that I had a really rough night. I didn't have much sleep. I'm standing at the edge of physical burnout. I'm doing my best with what I have to do with to handle what needs to be done here today. And I want to be able to be with you in the fullest capacity that I can. And I may not be able to meet all those things.
Mm-hmm.
By doing so, they've shared where they're at, what they would intend if they could, and it invites another person to potentially meet them in a different kind of grace level than meeting someone who's having a moment of, I'm having a rough day, and so their voice is a little harsher than they mean, or the tonality is, taken in a wrong way. And it invites levels of grace inside of organizations that feel like it can be a turning stone between how things become understood or don't, where we stand a chance to be able to bridge across great divides.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for speaking in a way that brings clarity, that shows these different application pieces. It's lovely.
Thank you.
Hmm.
I love the reference into organizational level in particular, that this kind of transparency in those spaces, there is this thing that happens when we're doing that masking, compartmentalizing, um, bringing our I've got everything together in every moment version of ourselves that the world so often asks for. It's become the default expectation. And this struggle that happens internally can be alleviated through that transparency, because there's a part of ourselves that's constantly managing the tension between what's happening in our minds and bodies and hearts, because they're all interconnected and influence one another.
Mm-hmm.
How resourced one is impacts how resourced each and all the parts are.
Yeah.
And so when we're in those places, there is both the between multiple individuals, two individuals, tension point that gets to have a little more slack in the line, a little more grace is possible, as you stated,
Mm-hmm.
in part because people aren't left guessing. They're not left wondering, are they upset with me? Are they going to take me off the project? Is
Yeah.
my world at risk? What would I do if I don't have this job, if I don't make this paycheck, if I can't be a part of this project?
Mm.
How will I advance my career? My whole life is at stake, and that,
Transparency is such a wonderful thing.
oh my goodness, and that can snowball into so many unaddressed narratives, because if we don't know and we're left guessing, then many of us try to make room for worst case scenarios. Some of us have practiced best and worst case scenarios and are like, could we please be somewhere in the middle? Can we at least somewhere in the middle? And we can set down so much of that tension by simply going, this is what's happening here. So, whatever maybe in my voice, maybe it's a high pain day. Maybe it's a
Mhm.
maybe it's a lack of sleep. Maybe it's, my dog has a thing going on. Maybe it's any number of things. My favorite cousin passed away. Like whatever it is, it's real. And when we carve that out and say it's not allowed in our professional spaces, we carve out a part of our professionals.
Mm-hmm. We make it almost not safe to be able to do our business.
Exactly. And so there's the tension in the outside relationships between the two people and the cord that connects them. And there's the tension inside the person of managing these things. Simply being able to state what's real for you can let you set down all of the layers of, or many of the layers of, my world is shifting. Things are hard, and I'm not allowed to show it. Massive shift in how many resources it takes to simply be present. Those resources could be going to the work. They could be going to the process at hand instead of the struggle to compartmentalize. And that doesn't mean that everybody has to bring their everything into group knowledge. Sometimes it saves resources to not have to speak about the thing until we're ready to. And normalizing that we get to choose that for ourselves and that there's access to setting down a couple of the systems that might be running to keep us maintained, to have it be okay to go, hold on a second. Let me get oriented. Can you say that again? And have people know that it's not because they didn't make sense, it's because the person is tired and they're wrangling their attentiveness and bringing as much as they can to you.
Mm-hmm. 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 Well,
It's an opportunity also for valuing how people put an effort in to compose themselves in order to be present, and having that level of transparency in the process can provide us with a feeling of being respected and being valued as someone is going, I got a little more that I got to work with to assemble all my bits so that I can be right here. And it's one of the ways we can have a flow of exchange of value.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Value, cherishing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Could
Yeah.
you pop up one of the, would you be willing to pop up one of the touchstones again? I love the piece about the peered relating, that whole segment, the in relationship with other piece.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah. This is actually a little bit of an older one, and it's what's up at the moment. So,
thank you.
this one says equal relating, and it has recently been updated to peered, so we can speak
Mhm.
about peered powered and leadership.
That whole segment,
Mhm.
just you were speaking earlier about that, and it feels really important to remember that in relationship, there is a wealth of different aspects to our in relationship world, that peered relating, powered relating, and leadership. And we can flow between those. We can be in moments in more than one of those sectors at a time, like you were talking about with parents.
Mm. Mhm.
And that can happen anywhere. We can be talking with a partner, and there are things I take lead on because they're easeful, they're meaningful. I feel like I'm bringing value. I get a lot out of inventory management for the household, right? So we're talking grocery shopping and making sure that the pantry has the back stock of the things, making sure that people have their eye drops or their nasal spray or their whatever it is that they need, their vitamins. And it's a very, very practical thing. That's also a place I'm taking leadership,
Mhm.
right? And they're still my peers.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right? And we address our power dynamics because they happen. I know they happen based on who's bringing in what kind of money, who's got what kind of resources of all different types, who's got time, who's got currency of what kind,
Mm.
right? Who's got the vehicle that's going to work the best for the current project? Who's got the skills that are going to work the best? We can be in this dance with peer powered and leadership relating with the very same people.
Mm-hmm. 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 Wow. Yeah, it popped up the at center relationship at center piece. This blue symbol that's here, where it's an arrow that goes straight through them from peered powered into leadership, and then kind of like circles back around to the peered side, represents the some of the dynamism that exists inside of that uh, robust ability by looking at least three-way perspectives of relationship. 'Cause you can have so many layers of powered and relating that could be like, I have an experience that you don't, and so therefore in that moment I have a power, all the way to I have money and you don't. Like I control your very ability to exist. Different levels of power.
Mhm.
Yeah. When you were speaking, let's see if I can do this. I want to put this here. Actually, I want to put this over itself, and I want to read something to you real quick. Oops, where did I go? There it is. I don't know if I can actually do that. So this is where I'm speaking from, this self at center, and these highlighted pieces.
Mhm.
Each one of those arrows in those different pictures I was showing you, each one of them is a question. And so here's just a couple. I would like to share four of them. And this is the self at center in regards to self, and the self at center in regards to relationship. That is something that feels like every single one of us who is having conversations is playing with. We're looking at life as it is for ourselves. I look at the parts that I play for myself. I look at how others affect me, right? Two perspectives, still internal in regards to internal. I look at my parts for myself, and I also look at how others or my environment affects me. So two layers this way. And now we look at two layers out. Me
Mhm.
looking at how I may affect others, and me looking at how others may have been affected by me, which is like
Mhm.
looking at their experience versus how your experience may have created their experience. So in those four levels deep around only self, right? We're looking at this picture here. This is kind of like these two questions and these two questions right here. This first level of relationship is, how is things for myself, and how is the world around me affecting me, and then how am I affecting it, and then how is it feeling affected by me.
Mhm.
So everywhere we go, we have these, and of course, each of those is a lens stack, because
Mhm.
how I play roles in my own life, well, I might be my own inner critic, I'm my own motivator, I'm my own parent, I'm my own lover, I'm my own, and keep going. We have so much roles that we play just in our own life. So anyway, those were the like, woo, all these pieces feel like they plug right in into this beautiful conversation.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah, I feel like because sometimes it's so hard to express ourselves in a way where we feel heard, we can end up becoming our own echo chambers as well, right? If we feel like we have to fight to justify who we are, how we are, why we made a choice, then we can end up in that fight place, whether there's anyone to fight with or not, whether there's anyone who's judging us the way that the narratives in our head are preparing us to meet judgment
Mm.
or not. And if we are in deep cycles of being that echo chamber, being in that judgment or self-validation place, or both, as they are intense dance partners, um, we can then begin to hear proof of others viewing us in those ways in what they say. And that does not mean that it is what they're saying. And so inside of those, how am I being affected by others, right? The parts I'm playing for myself, and how are others affecting me?
Mhm.
Remembering that in those roles that we play for ourselves, we may be staging fights that no one else is participating in.
As we're living out and enacting the wounds and the archetypes that we have floating around inside of our being and our dharma and our karma and our life stories and lessons and learnings. Whoo! You are speaking to like the cosmic flow.
Why the practice of what am I not understanding is so important to
Yeah.
my maintaining balance.
Mm. What could I not be understanding here? What a
Mhm,
profound question to ask in almost any situation where things feel tense, awkward.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm.
Mhm. Being
And
open. Go
s-
ahead.
sometimes it's our trauma showing up and being like, this might be here too. And sometimes it's our fear of loss.
Mm.
What if this isn't here? And some part of us has reached out and gone, oh, there could be a joy that I've been seeking here. There could be a delight. There could be a connectivity that I've yearned for here. And what if they don't want it? Right? What if I'm reading this wrong? What if the thing that's a good thing is not actually here? I'm afraid of a loss of a thing that I don't really know if it's there yet. And there's so many walls we can put up to keep ourselves protected from that.
Mhm. Sounds like an easy gateway for things like imposter syndrome
Mhm,
to come
mhm,
waltzing through the door.
exactly. So sometimes asking, what am I not understanding, or what more is there to understand? And they're each useful in different ways.
Mm.
Can be about seeing a fear that's showing up in a quirky way. One of the games I caught myself playing is, if I don't want them, if I don't want the connection, if I'm just angry at this person that what I really want to do is go hug, then I might not have to discover that they don't want whatever it is that I'm seeking, that they don't have time for me, that they don't have time for the connection, that the connection might have faded for them. And I've experienced that inside of trying to find empowerment, where I was trying to build habits of, just because someone else has a view of me does not mean I have to internalize it.
Mm. Mhm.
I'm very good at listening to what other people are saying and going, wait, is that in here somewhere?
Mhm.
To the extent that there were times when I let that override what I knew about myself, instead of being a companion. So
Mhm.
about myself, or what I was trying to do that could allow me to grow into more effectively expressing who I am and how I am. And so that was an odd little way that my fear of being disappointed would show up. And it would show up with a, let's pick a fight over something that doesn't really matter.
Mm.
In our head, I'm not picking a fight with them. I'm getting ready in case there's a fight. And
Mm.
I'm getting
Mhm.
to let go of attachment so that I don't have to be disappointed by the attachment not really being there from the other end. And you don't get to see those parts of how your brain's working if you're not looking and going, what was that?
Why did I think that way, or why did I react that way to
Mhm. What parts am I playing for
how
myself?
the stories shape our identities and then our personal power? You have a piece around personal power. Would you be interested in It just feels like it's a wonderful little segue right there.
Hold it up already,
Ooh, exciting.
right? Personal power, an intentionally curated and practiced individual sovereign state, which can allow us to root deeply into our knowledge of self.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean
Hmm.
we're not looking at how the world reflects their experience of us. It means that we start centered here. What do I know? And what can what I know learn from someone else's experience?
Hmm.
If that comes second, then we can be looking at augmenting from a centered place, from a strong foundation. We can operate from that, which eases our ability to be present as the person we choose to be, passions and emotions included. Because a lot of people have just stripped those things away. If I don't have those things at the forefront, then I can just keep it all on lockdown and I don't have to worry about the ripples that I might create. Well, we're here to create ripples. We get to choose what kind of ripples they get to be in some cases, and we get to simply be and deal with the consequences in other places. So, a strong foundation by practicing, curating, and practicing our individual sovereign state can help us be present as the person we choose to be. Meet judgment with curiosity, judgment from the outside or the inside. Sometimes judgment's coming from inside the house. And weather the storms of circumstance and trauma that life can sometimes include.
Mhm. That personal power piece, that sovereignty aspect. In the touchdown matrix, it's the second step down from awareness is up at the top, and so much of the touchdown matrix is like that the top. There is an order, and the top is not always only the top of things, because every time we go through, like, we get to our sovereignty, oh, we become aware that there's another level of our sovereignty that we are here to become aware of. And so we dip back into awareness to weave more awareness into our sovereignty. We get deeper in our sovereignty and we begin to communicate those pieces, and we build that personal power now through language and relating with one another. And then we're like, oh, but now I need to become aware of the other person. So now I have to dip back into awareness in order to weave the sovereignty understanding of the other person to be able to communicate how it's going to be well reached, well read by the other. And then whatever the agency then becomes, the choices that come from that communication piece, that personal power feels like a checkpoint over and over and over again, because our personal power changes and shifts. It feels like every time our awareness changes, every time we enter and step out of relationship with people, because we are changed the minute we're in someone else's aura.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on what their energy, when I say aura, I mean in their energy. That could even be here on this Zoom call.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's definitely, at least for me, an energy that I can sense across these spaces, whether that's tone, body language, cadence, and of course, even more so in person.
Mm-hmm.
That personal power piece feels so, it feels like a lovely checkpoint to continue to check in on. Where are we with our perception of our own personal power? Are we in curiosity? Are we in judgment? I loved the judgment and self-validation, two sides of the same coin piece you dropped back there. I just want to kind of like pick that up and pin it to the wall for anybody who is playing with internal self-judgment. Perhaps there might be somewhere a piece of validation that's also hanging around, either needing it in sort of a, and here I feel judgment is the 18th gene key, and its repressive and reactive sides is inferiority complex and superiority complex. When I heard you speak about judgment and self-validation, it felt like a similar kind of weave and balance, where if we find ourselves in a place of inferiority, check to make sure we don't have some superior aspect of ourselves that's being hypercritical, and then also vice versa. we have a hypercritical, we can hear, do we have a brat somewhere who's like, but I'm just mad because I didn't get my insert whatever. I have those, I think we all do. It's not a like shame on you. I think if we all recognize where they are and speak, not so much speak about them to stay in them, but own them for our own world, then goodness
Mhm.
gracious, we can get on to some more important things in life, right?
Mhm. If we're paying attention to where that part of us is speaking up and feeling the injustice of not receiving something it wants, then
Mm,
we can be in conscious curation of whether that want actually serves us, whether it's a need we've not been addressing and
mm,
been categorizing as a want,
mm,
right? I have people in my world who, when I first started talking with them about wants and needs, the only thing that qualified as needs for them was food, shelter, and clothing. And that's that is a very minimalist approach. And I feel that there's room for expansion.
mm,
And that's what got curated in their understanding. And there are reasons for that.
yeah,
Remembering that there are reasons for all the parts of us.
yeah.
We don't have to like them. And if we understand them, we can relate with them differently and we can work with them differently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what I said earlier, like, we got more important things to do. I was speaking to them. We got more important things to do than sit here and be mean to ourselves.
Yes,
Like,
definitely.
accept the things that is and accept the things that is around us, and let's do things with them. It's the
Exactly.
process of like lemonade out of lemons. And like we're valuing the lemons, we're cherishing the lemons, even if we got
Mhm.
lemons and we wanted peaches.
Right. And I have found that when we're looking at that, we get an opportunity to go, oh boy, there might be a more effective way to go about trying to meet this need rather than suppressing the need want thing.
Mm,
Listening to the little voice that says, I'm cranky because I didn't get my, well,
mhm.
then we can look at, okay, you wanted cookies and we're not always going to have cookies. However, maybe we could try some water and a different kind of food and have knowledge that there will be other cookies. And there will be agains with cookies. And maybe our body needed something and we waited and waited.
Mm, mhm.
And then cookie was what could come out of our that part of our brain, right? I got to discover that I had begun to form attachments to certain kinds of physical affection, time snuggling, things like that, on certain days of the week at one point a few years ago. And because I was looking at oh, I really wanted this thing, I got to go, oh, I haven't asked for that thing in a negotiated, actual, say it out loud way. I don't want to hold other people accountable for things that they didn't agree to. And it's okay that I was wanting more of that than the time frames that were designated to that. Both are okay. And so I get to go, oh, my system is reaching for more co-regulation. Are there ways that we can address that? Would you be willing to help me prioritize that in a way that works for everyone? And it turned out that it was simply this thing where I'd had my own level of, I'm only allowed to have this thing on the nights that are specifically designated for me to spend time with this person. And then, there happened to be this other night for a while where nobody else was around and extra snuggle time happened. And I had to get through the wall I'd put up of, I'm only allowed to take up this much space. And that was the internal thing was
Mm,
happening that I
mhm,
needed to move through
mhm.
so that I could get to well, I could just I could ask for more snuggles. I could ask to make sure that there's another night where we get to sit for a few minutes, sometimes 5 minutes. is really all I need for my system to go, okay, I feel loved. And my nervous system is reset.
Mm,
I also got to diversify. I found that there's a particular green drink, the Purium stuff,
mm-hmm.
that actually settles my body in a similar way to cuddles.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turns out
Nutrients.
if I
Yep.
pushed past what I actually had to work with
Yeah.
and dipped into deeper resources, I can get some re-regulation by giving a nutrient dense
Yeah.
thing to my body.
Nourishment.
And I
Oh.
can also do things like I started asking for, hey, could we sit down and snuggle for a minute? Hey, could I stand forehead to forehead and hand to hand? Oh, palm to palm, forehead to forehead does the same thing for me.
Mm,
Because sometimes the people that I want to feel that close connection with and co-regulate with, our bodies aren't able to do the things in the squishy couch or, wrap
mm,
around one another in the same way. So I got to develop multiple ways to meet this need. And I
mm,
got to practice being in my sovereignty and simply asking.
mm. Personal power. I think that ability at that personal power level is so important for seeding positions of power. It's how can we be? How can we be expected to be responsible and accountable to being in places of power outside of ourselves if we are uncomfortable holding it for ourselves?
Well,
Thank you for sharing such a deep story and a vulnerable story, because it gives deep peeks into these different positions and these different places.
mhm.
Yeah, so important.
my Here's where I've practiced my practical application of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm.
Um, I feel tie-ins with things that we've talked about, like the goals, methods, and priorities piece, because so often when we're engaging with ourselves or with others, it can feel like our efforts get derailed somewhere and coming back into balance, coming back to center, coming back to things being in sync, um, a lot of times can happen if we look at what are our goals, what are our methods, and what are our priorities around said thing. For ourselves, we can end up in that place because suddenly we had another thing that's also high priority come in. And so our methods get, or our priorities get reordered. And if we can take a look at what shifted in those three sectors, or what may be feeling tension points where we're getting pulled in more than one direction, then we can be in a place of being able to work with what is and honor all of the things being important, or simply what has occurred. Because sometimes things occur that, whether we want anything to do with them or not, they're happening and they're impacting what we have going on. Right? Power outages are a great example for that.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Yep, your methods definitely change, and your goals, and perhaps your priorities when the weather goes out, like when the lights go out like that. Yep. Yeah. It's a good example of like how do your goals shift?
Mhm.
How do your methods, like how you wash dishes is as a method changes when you lose power. Your
Yep.
goal for like getting a newsletter out or taking the kids to somewhere might change if you have to stay home and keep the wood stove going so your pipes don't freeze.
Yeah. Or what do? We've got three freezers. It feels a little ridiculous, and it allows us to do things like buy meat from sources that all of us can eat without having digestive distress.
Mm-hmm.
So we buy in bulk and store it in the freezers. Well, I don't know. We've been looking at how might we can some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
so that we don't have to rely on electricity to keep them edible.
Mm-hmm. Smart.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah, it's weaving ecological understandings. What's how do we tend what is needed in the most inexpensive, most direct, most
Mhm.
sustainable way? Mm-hmm. Oh. Mm-hmm.
I feel like we've covered a lot. There we are. Ah, maybe. Mm.
There we go. Sorry for the step away. Step away for 2 seconds and the cat steals my spot. Hello, madam. Methinks you would like some snuggles. Yeah, okay. Pardon that portaling and consequent bio break. No. I don't think I lost you in the middle of a sentence. I think we were deciding what was happening next. I was asking you if there was anything still in your world or in your screen or in your mind and heart that felt yummy to share with us this evening.
Feel like we touched on a great deal of what had bubbled forth.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I have a piece on alignment types that if we want to touch on it, we can. And also, I feel like we covered a lot.
Um, I'm gonna say go ahead if you have the energy to, because these videos can always be cut and spliced and turned into offerings in a later time and space, which is something I really see. And I think that this could be a lovely addition into many places. So if you are fueled and resourced, I invite.
Thank you.
Mhm.
It's a beautiful thing to have people understand how valuable invitation is to me.
Mm, mhm. Dancing that generator projector dance.
I appreciate you.
Mm.
Mhm. Inside of maintaining balance during growth and expansion, I am often looking at what is aligned in terms of the opportunities for places that my resources could go, my time, my thoughts, um, whatever I've got that I'm thinking about sharing in some way or that someone is offering space for sharing, whether it be a friend offering for me to come to their place for dinner, or an offer of a conversation, whatever it is, I'm looking at how is it aligned, because that has me step back from all of the noise that can happen around how do I fit this in? I've got, what else do I have? Is there room? Is there time? Am I going to feel okay? Da, 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 da. Because what all of that comes down to, if we set aside any judgments, and that means our fears about if someone's going to feel like we don't love them because we didn't make time when they offered, all of the judgments and the what's possible that someone else might think about the choice that I make. If we step away from all of those things and simply look at, is it aligned at this time with the things happening in my world and the things happening with my being for me to engage with this opportunity? And how is it aligned is a next layer deep into that. What I've got is alignment types. It's languaging to assist in that process. And the languaging that I have lets us look at whether it is aligned to be connected, to take ourselves in whatever fashion into a space and share our resources of self in this opportunity that's present. Or is it aligned for us to operate in parallel with such an opportunity, or divided from such an opportunity, or divergent, meaning there's some shared and some point of divergence? When we begin to look at alignment in that way, we can set down all the narratives that try and jump on the bandwagon of our choice. Process of choosing can be simpler. And we can also engage with others around the alignment, which means we can offer the thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you so much for offering. Thank you so much for wanting this connection in this way, my voice, my time, my whatever it is, to be in connection with you. And the choice itself can be about what's possible for us in the layers of our living experience, and not about the connection itself. For these, I've got a little chart, and I have them in groups with conducive alignments and corrosive alignments, because we can be in connection in ways that are conducive for our being, or ways that are corrosive for our being, and that relationship can fluctuate. And so with the conducive and corrosive, I've got them in pairs here. We're looking at symbiotic and pressured being a deeply integrated alignment, where we are dancing in close proximity with one another. Our business partner might be somebody that we might be in symbiotic alignment with. Our life partners may be people that we're in symbiotic alignment with, or even for portions of things. And that can become a pressured situation. If we are inside of a pipeline, we're working that closely together. If things get out of alignment and still within the same structure of connection, it can end up becoming a pressured situation. Thankfully, we can also go in the other direction. So as an example, conducive becoming corrosive from symbiotic to pressures when actions are no longer in sync. And when we're looking at it as, oh, our actions are not syncing up anymore, then we pull out a lot of the flare that can happen because we're feeling hurt by some of the results of actions not being in sync. And if we can instead address that, we would like to come back into sync with one another, then we might be able to discover that someone got very excited about a thing and was charging ahead and missed their charge ahead based in their excitement put the collaborative efforts out of sync, and that creates a pressured situation for the other party or parties. We may find that there was not any kind of intentional pressurization, and that means that we could build back to an in sync, symbiotic state. We've got these pieces, the compatible to combative. Can we be working together? Are we weaponizing something inside of that togetherness? It's okay that we're different. It's often a strength. Diversity is a strength. I believe that as core belief over here. And if the differences are weaponized, we can end up in a combative place. If difference is celebrated, even if it's hard to bring the differences together inside the collaboration, if we're celebrating the differences, then we can honor those differences as we figure out how to collaborate.
Mhm.
Acceptable and consumptive. This differs from compatible and combative in that it's able to be connected. It's not necessarily a long-term interwoven, and there may be aspects of things that are connected. Two different departments in a business may be connectable and not always interwoven, even though they're operating as parts of a whole. It sounded like maybe you had a thought.
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
I am absorbing and applying it in my
Wonderful.
brain. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Connectable and consumptive. When we are letting our passions override our agreements, we can consume the other parties and their efforts. We can end up again in that place where it may be excitement driven. And if we continue and continue and continue beyond the agreed process, then we may end up absorbing in ways that are not negotiated the efforts of other individuals. They may end up feeling like they are no longer a part of the process and are simply being used as a tool. And then we're not actually in collaboration. If we can allow our agreements to shape our actions, allow the agreements to sort of put the boundaries around how we go about things, how our methods and our priorities meet our goals, what goals we're attempting to meet within the collaborated spaces. You may find this in two different companies working together for a part of a community project. And if what one party asks of the other party stays within the agreed upon boundaries, then the collaboration stays sound, it stays conducive. If it drifts, scope creep is a way that that can drift and consume the participation of the other individuals. For our parallel and segregated, sometimes we're not meant to be all up inside one another's business. And we can be in really healthy, even celebrative coexistence.
Mm.
We can be working in the same fields and not choose to have a practice in the same business, right? When we're operating in parallel, we can also grow and benefit and be in community together in really beautiful ways and serve our extended community in even more richly diverse ways if we're maintaining our parallel alignment through conducive behaviors. So we may honor the differences. We may send somebody to another practitioner down the road because they specialize in a way that is more deeply aligned with the needs of the individual who's coming to us. It's a beautiful thing to not have to try and meet every need that someone comes to your door with if there's somebody who's better prepared, better resourced, or more specialized in being able to meet that need. And when we have that neighborly, sort of community-oriented, healthy relationship, we're not necessarily going to be interconnected in our active work. We can honor that we're interconnected as a community and we're serving the community, and the community can be better served by having both parties doing their individual thing. And so there we have our differences. When they isolate, we can end up in a segregated place. When differences are honored, we can end up in a parallel place. Here's where we get into we are not interconnected places, or we're not going to maintain interconnectivity. Divergent and divided are both really healthy options for alignment. Sometimes it is beautiful to work in an interconnected way with someone to the point of divergence. At that point, you may be anyone that you studied with, right? Before you specialized. You came to that point of specialization and diverged. So many things that are valuable about the time together and the time apart. And sometimes it's one of these, right? We come together and we go apart, and we come together and we go apart. I love the people that I'm in longer orbits with, where we have really rich experiences when we are together. And then we have times away where we apply what we learned there, where we learn new things, and then we come back together and have really rich experiences again. It can be beautiful. Our guts have divergent alignment points, right? And it's real important that they're that way. They also have divided alignments. I do not want what's happening in one organ to be spilling over sidelong into another organ. They're connected where they're meant to connect, and those need to be the ways that they're connected and not other ways. Healthy, divided alignment can be a beautiful thing. When we step into corrosive, we're looking at degenerative, where one is eating away at another, or divisive, where we are actively tearing apart people's fabric of interconnectivity by weaponization. So, for divergent to degenerative, differences are unaddressed. We're ignoring them. We're pretending they aren't there. That's not helping anything. We're not honoring what is. We're not honoring either the parts that are closely interconnected or connectable, nor the parts that are separate and divergent if we're ignoring the differences. When differences shape our options, we get to move from degenerative into divergent, because then we're looking at where are our divergent points? Where do we diverge? Where do we get to come back into connection? That can be what helps to allow the really beautiful relationships that come and go and come and go. Divided to divisive is when difference is demonized. When we are actively associating the difference between whatever we have going on and another, or someone else is demonizing the differences between themselves and us, we are creating divisiveness. It's where we end up a lot of times with people insisting that if someone is their friend or loves them, then they can't be friends or love another person who they could be in a divided alignment with, and instead are being divisive by demonizing something about that person. And this is different than identifying a boundary, right? I want to speak to that real quick. I can have had an incredibly corrosive experience with someone, and I can have a boundary of not engaging with other people about that person or in shared space with that person. It's a boundary I can set. That is not a rule where I'm telling them they can't be connected with the person. That is not a rule where I'm telling them that they have to do something differently than what they're called to. Even if my boundary means that I'm not engaging with someone, if I've had an incredibly toxic relationship with someone, there are people in my life who I do not engage with any longer because of situations like that. And I have had people who were shared people in our lives who were able to separate their interactions and not bring words and stories and their processing about that person into our relating. And that has functioned really well. When it comes down to it, I want, even for those people that I've had very corrosive interactions with, to be able to have connection. I want for them to be able to grow and learn. I want for them to be able to have a rich and fulfilling life. It simply may not be possible for me to be a part of that or for them to be a part of mine in a conducive way. And so when we're talking about being divisive, we're talking about demanding of others that they take your side. We're talking about, even more so, extolling the dangers of engaging with someone because they're different, right? We can have our personal boundaries. We can have the places where we remove people. I've had friends that I've had to say, I love you, and I have to step back from this connection because you brought someone who was corrosive back into my world in a way that was also corrosive. And it didn't have to be like that. I love you, and I'm going to step back. And that is a thing that I get to do to keep myself in safer situations. And it is not the same as me extolling a demonized view of a person because they are different than me. That is my personal experiences shaping my boundaries. These things get confused with one another in certain circles. Now, moving from divisiveness to divided is when difference is accepted. Doesn't mean that we have to be all up in one another's business. These are both alignments that have a separation and a pretty distinct separation. We may not be in a position to be able to go, hey, go see them on the other side of town. We may feel that their practices are not practices that we would stand by. And that does not mean that we're demonizing their differences, right? If we truly have a feeling that something that someone is practicing is dangerous for people, there are places we can go and talk to the systems in place in order to make sure that medicine is practiced in safe ways. We can go to the systems in place or to the community. We can go have a conversation with someone we're in a divided alignment with. And instead of being divisive, we can step into a process like TouchStones and talk about, where is our different understanding? What don't I understand? What am I concerned about? And how can we move through this difference in a way that accepts the differences and still addresses what we feel might be dangerous, and have the community come together to look at that potential danger? And that can help us tease apart whether something is about a process that we're personally uncomfortable with, or a process that someone maybe didn't understand the whole of what they were doing. If we're looking at working with medicines, plant medicines, pharmaceutical medicines in a way that someone simply isn't aware of the way that they interact with other medicines, then we may be bringing a really important, valuable piece of information to the community or to the individual. And we may need to do it through community if we're not able to connect with them personally to address the thing. But that doesn't mean we have to demonize it, right? We can accept the difference and explore what is dangerous and what is safe and how we can move through that, even if we're in divided alignments.
Say for a lot of people, this whole alignment conversation is a really great place to feel into where does your nervous system freak out around self-regulation? Because I think there's various points where it's like, I don't know if I'm okay with this point. This part feels like leaning into where it's very uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Yeah. I wanted to just pop this one image up on a screen. It's the same information that you were just seeing with RoniJean. It's a little simpler.
Mhm.
This is sort of laid out in that spherological perspective where each of those 6 pairings is its kind of its own axis, and we can look at it kind of being in its own set of spectrums. So yeah, and I really love, RoniJean, that you gave us both what I'd call forwards and backwards, or inside, outside, outside, inside. How do we move from conducive to corrosive and from corrosive to conducive? Because
Mhm.
even though, corrosive might sound negative, there are times when we go there because we want that. We might like the copper patina that comes from corrosion,
Mhm.
and then we might also like it that, our electrical cables are conducive to allowing electricity to move through them in a non-corrosive way so that we have power. Yeah, thank you very
If
much.
we didn't have things breaking down in our bodies, they wouldn't run. That digestion is a breakdown process, right?
Right, right. Understanding things is a breakdown process.
Hmm.
And a breakdown, why did I feel that way? What did that feeling get connected to? And, what is that story connected to? And is that story necessary to my belief of this practice, of this action?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I know acid reflux can put holes in your throat,
Oof.
right? We need
Yeah.
that down in our belly, in our stomach, and it doesn't do good things to have it moving up into other areas. And so, how do we work with that?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's like in the garden analogy, we don't put the chicken manure straight onto the garden because it's going to burn the vegetables. It's going to burn the baby seedlings. It needs to mature. It needs to ripen. It needs to dissipate into the soil a bit more before it can be brought over and put into a situation. So breakdown feels like it also involves a timing factor.
Yes.
Like your body needs X amount of time in order to digest food. The
Mhm.
chicken manure over, in a certain part of the compost heap for a little while before you put it into the garden. Probably a little bit like allowing ourselves time and space to both emotionally integrate and mentally integrate deep changes, relationship shifts, cosmological encounters. I mean, we're sitting inside of an eclipse in this conversation that's happening in the next 24 hours. Um, all these things take time to sift down into ourselves, into our
Mhm.
understandings.
Yeah. This is um, why we tend to use the term composting both for
Mm-hmm.
processing our emotional things and relational things as well as garden things
Mm-hmm.
and existential things. Really practical relationship example is when we meet those moments where some of the very things that we love about people become a hard thing. That's
Mm,
a timing piece.
yeah.
Right. That is I love this thing, and when it's applied in this particular way, it's hard. well, that's because something's happening over here and something's happening over there. And even if that same behavior may be a thing that can pull us up out of other kinds of difficulty, it may not be a one size fits all behavior for every kind of difficulty we experience. Very few things are.
Right.
I know. I almost always want a hug, and I cannot receive them at times.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I always love weight. And yet in the middle of summer, do not put anything heavy on me. I'm sweating my ass off.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like we are coming up on our time here, and I feel like this has been a wonderful conversation. We've been all over the place, and I'm getting the inspiration inside of this to maybe take these different pieces that we do and put them up as an audio podcast.
Mm.
More interested here into these kinds of conversations as we talk about self and community and what does it mean to step into community together. It's like we've had organizational conversations, we've had mission and relationship and self and community. And I
Mhm.
think they're all different conversations. A community piece is where we all step in as equal members in the community, sharing our thoughts and our voices and our feelings in the matter.
Mhm.
So yeah, I find a deep value in this conversation, and I can hear down the line people listening into this conversation being pleased that it was had, even if they were not here for it this evening.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Thank
Mhm.
you so much, RoniJean. Greatly appreciate you. Hi, Stephine. I think we're gonna step off of this recording and then we can have some chat time amongst here, unless we would like to do that and keep that on the recording side. Um, thoughts, feels? No
And
thoughts, feels? Do you have any thoughts to share, Stephine? What's been your feels and all this, Miss Lady in White, darling in white?
I've written them down. My brain is quite clunky this evening. Um, I really, I just wanted to note overall, Rainy with the within the self. I identify with that a lot with the as I'm bringing the Grep's Guide to Gremlining together, and it's helping me to get back through into Gene Key 10 again. And so it was when I saw that, it put me back where I was at, because that's the lesson that always comes back around as I'm lens stacking, right, Gene? I'm like, it's like I circle around. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm here again, and so much awareness now. Then I'm so much. It sounds funny. I just felt more immature, just like even a year ago. The way that I see when I'm always working in bubbles. So I think that's why I like the lens stacking so much. Is I can, when I'm not able to use my words or share the feelings or the ideas that I've organized, I know that I can go down and use the MultiDox. So thank you for that, because over and over again, it has helped me when I'm like, I can't, I mean, write down if I can't even get groceries or things. I start and I write it down in the book, or sharing ideas when we talk about relationship with others, with my adjacent partner. I mean, that's a constant like soap opera. I don't know. And it's a whole different when we talk about corrosive and that whole section. It brought me to that because we have such an honest, trusting awareness, and we share that, and we're both double Scorpios. He has, he does it with more couth. That's my self judgment on myself. So I identified with that a lot throughout tonight's talk, and I appreciated that because I've been running around for a couple of days kind of stuck in a funk, which is kind of why I'm wearing the white too. I'm in ceremony, and also when I get to that level, I literally just I'm either gonna have to be naked or wear white. So decided to wear white clothes on for us. Um, um, Yeah, I can share them around later too. I just wrote them all over the place. And I think that's all my brain has to say. Here's Miss um was there anything else? Oh, just surviving. Thriving while surviving, that's been the theme too. And I my brain is fitting how it fits into all of that was here tonight, and I'll share it later as I can get them out. So thank you for this evening. Wow.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Wow. Oh, yeah. Well, thanks so much, folks, for tuning in. I'm going to go ahead and close this recording for the evening, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.